Fear. It's a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, and something we all feel, from vague unease to major and crippling phobias. We learn to feel fear from our earliest days. Then, of course, we have to learn how to manage it. When former Prime Minister Harold Macmillan was asked what he most feared, he gave the memorable and telling response: events. We know that we are vulnerable, that life isn't predictable. We can't control everything, and sooner or later harm or circumstances we'd really rather avoid must come our way. Fear helps us to negotiate the obstacle course of life that we face, but it can also restrict our freedom. In ancient Israel, the general levels of fear, not unlike in today's Israeli-Palestinian conflict, were much increased by intertribal and racial tensions. The inauguration of a monarchy was largely a response to the physical vulnerability of a distinctive people. And the neighbours? Well, the neighbours were not disposed to peaceable coexistence. The Amalekites and the Philistines, they were a constant threat. And some confrontations would be bigger than others.
Oh, Lord, it were embarrassing. Bad enough that the old man had sent the annoying pipsqueak to bring us supplies. Much barracking from our fellow squaddies, you can imagine. But at least we had better provisions than they did. But the little runt, well, he wants a good nose round before he would go home. The armies, well, they were encamped on opposite slopes of the valley, so it were obvious there were a standoff in progress. No sooner had Daisy unpacked the donkey load than he caught sight of the man-mountain David Goliath of Gath. Could hardly miss him, built like a brick outpost. And he heard the taunts, the filly ranks jeering and spear rattling, while our entire force were rooted to the spot. The big bloke, well, he'd a mouth like a trumpet. Daisy, well, he were quick on the uptake. Nobody were going to take on giant haystacks. He were terrifying enough, man and a half tall. But if the enslavement of the loser's entire people were in the balance, would you? So, stalemate. That's all. Our tall, athletic, oh so impressive king, skulking in his tent like a girl. Our glorious leader. What a joke. Before Ab and Sham and I can stop him, the kid has marched straight into the king's enclosure and demanded an audience. One of my mates in the king's bodyguard filmed me in later on. He steps right in and volunteers to fight, just like that. I can do it. That mega bully don't scare me. What? Apparently Saul told him not to be so daft. He were too young, and Gobby had been a soldier for years and years. But Daisy said how he'd been taking on bigger lions and bears, defending his flock, and he weren't fret. So, next thing, Upsy Daisy comes clanking outside, wearing Saul's own armour. Never seen anything more ridiculous in my life. He looked like a toddler trying on Daddy's armour. He starts to clang down the slope. But then he just stops and starts calmly peeling the metalwork off bit by bit. We heard him explaining how he could barely walk and they'd stick with what he knew. I know we should have yelled out, tried to stop him, our kid. With just one swipe, that great brute could snap ickle Daisy like a twig. To be honest, we were scared. Garby were bound to win, and then we'd all be off to Gaza in a handcart. Armed just with his stick and his slingshot, then he trots down the slope, and I see him stoop by the brook. I think maybe his sandal straps are undone. Meanwhile, Garby is roaring and boasting and waving round a spear the size of a tree trunk. His shield bearer goes ahead of him, gingerly down the bank towards the prey. Flabbergasted to hear our Davy giving as good as he got. "You mess wi' us, you mess wi' our God," was about the strength of it. He promised him a sticky end, coming soon. You could almost feel the ground a-shaking as Garby breaks into a run then. I could barely watch, but I couldn't look away neither. It were like some vast spider rushing out to pick some helpless fly out of its web. But as he takes back his arm to attack, quick as lightning, Daisy takes out his shepherd's catapult, winds up and lets fly. We didn't even see the missile, if I'm honest, nor hear it find its mark. Kerpow! Right between the eyes. Still travelling forwards then, big Phil crumples and topples like a stack of plates. The armour clanks down around him as he slides forward headlong down the bank, bowing face down to the God of Israel. There is a gasp from the filly ranks as the shield bearer just jumps aside. And there's Goat Boy on him in a flash, taking up Garby's vast sword and gleefully hacking off that giant head before hoisting it up to wave it at the army ranks. There's a moment of silence as everyone tries to take in what just happened. Saul raises his arm in salute, and our boys go wild. Ab and Sham and me, we look at each other for a split second, and suddenly we are leaping and hugging and screaming like all the rest. Thing is, you see, in all the tension and the anxiety, seems we'd all but forgotten about our God. If he be for us, well, who can be against us? He might have lost his patience with that has-been Saul, but he's with Daisy all right, like old man Samuel reckoned. Pitting that weedy little sprog against Garby might look like an out-and-out long shot. Odds-wise, impossible. But God saw that a long shot were exactly what were needed.
Just like us, the tendency of God's particular people in the grip of fear was to underestimate the Lord, to make him just as weak and powerless as we feel ourselves, to assume that he cannot act to change the course of events. While young David may have looked an unlikely champion to his brothers, to the ailing and erratic Saul, to the Israelite and Philistine armies, well, probably in the eyes of all the world, he turned out to be his people's secret weapon. Out in the wilds, the lad had acquired practical skills as a shepherd and developed a strength of character which enabled him to tackle and overcome the problem that was paralysing the entire nation. The threats we face are not all as obvious as Goliath, but we should be trying on the whole armour of God, I think. If we cannot manage the weight of it all, the one essential is the shield of faith. It helps us to trust in the love and protection of our ever-ready, everlasting shepherd to deliver us from even our most gigantic fears.